Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my fine friends. Welcome to episode 18 of season 12 of the Tom Petty Project podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Brown. This is the weekly podcast that digs into the entire Tom Petty catalogue, song by song, album by album, and includes conversations with musicians, fans, and people connected with Tom along the way. So today's episode is a fan chat with a musician and podcaster who I've gotten to know a little over the last 12 months and wanted to learn more about. So Greg Wolfe, or Wolfie, as he's more commonly known in the podcast universe, is a bass player and band leader and singer for the Connecticut-based band Accidental Breakdown. He's also one of the co-hosts of the Regarding series of podcasts, which breaks down a much-maligned album in an artist's catalogue each season to see if it has any redeeming qualities. It's a show I've been lucky to guest on a couple of times. It's hilarious. It's a lot of fun, but it's really detailed and really, really good. And I've always enjoyed Wolfie's insights whenever I've been on that show or when I've listened to it. As always, his 10 questions will come out for you on Friday. But until then, sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with the wonderful Greg Wolfe.
Tom Petty. Tom Petty Project. Tom Petty. Hey, Tom Petty Project.
No, I'm excited. I get to talk a little bit too, right?
Get to talk. You'll be
change.
talking more so than me, hopefully.
Can't get a word edgewise with some of these guys. Chaz is such a talker too, right?
Such a force of nature. Well, maybe let's jump off there. So we kind of met each other through mutual friends and through podcasting. And you're one of the co-hosts, one of the original co-hosts, which is ever growing, of the Regarding series, which was Regarding Lulu was the first attempt. So why don't you give us a little bit of an overview of what the heck that was?
And you want me to talk a little bit, Kevin, about how Chaz and I came together to do that? So Chaz and I have known each other for a very long time, and we met through work. We worked together many, many years ago, decades ago now. And he was out here in Connecticut, which is where I live. And he moved away after I knew him for a few years, probably maybe 5 years after I met him. He moved out to Colorado, which is where he's been ever since. But we've stayed in touch and done this and that together over the years. And we've always had that musical connection as well. So I think he started doing some podcasting with the Corey Morissette crew, the Deep Dive crew, and somehow got into that, got connected as a listener and then a guest, I think. On some of the podcasts. You guys met him and welcomed him into the fold. And so he decided, okay, hey, it's time for me to do my own podcast. What can I do? And he came up with this idea, and he wanted to find somebody to do it with him. And I'm not sure what number I was on the list that he asked to do it with him. I'm pretty sure I wasn't the first person he asked to do it with him, but I guess I was the first person that said yes. And I didn't know what to think. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I didn't know anything about podcasting really,
Right.
Especially the type of podcasting that you guys do in the music genre and all that sort of thing. So I was like a little confused, but he wanted to do it. He said, let's give it a try. And I thought the idea was really interesting, which was, let's do an album. Let's do a podcast on an album that was panned by both critics and fans, but there's reason to believe that there's a gem underneath that, or there's value, or maybe in the case of Lulu, it was, we had this quote from David Bowie saying that this will go down, and we think in seriousness, saying, not in sarcasm, but in seriousness, saying that this will go down as Lou Reed's masterpiece. And so we thought, wow, maybe there is something there. And so that's, that was sort of the start. And that, when that worked out a little bit, Chaz was motivated to do a second season, and we thought that we would continue with that concept, which is one album
Yeah.
that we think, was not well received, but that there may be some value in there that we can um, try to pull out by taking that deep dive, by
Right.
by focusing on it, which, often critics and fans, neither of them will commit a lot of effort to an album if it doesn't reward them fairly quickly,
Yeah.
And so, and I think that's an interesting concept because there clearly are works of art, and we talked about this probably more in the first season than any other time, but works of art where you really have to put a lot into it in order to get something out. But if you're willing to put a lot into it, you get a lot out.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that that's a very musician thing too, isn't it? I'm sure that other artists, like, painters and sculptors, are the same. But as a musician, when you're a musician of any level and you've played for years, and we'll get into that, but I think that once you sort of say, okay, well, I'll turn off my, do I like this straight away? Do I want to put this on the radio, or do I want to have this playing while I'm doing something? Yada, yada, yada. If I'm going to sit and listen to it critically, you almost always find something, especially if it's, I mean, Lou Reed and Metallica. Come on. I mean, these guys are, A-list Hall of Fame talents. Even if you overall you think, well, I don't think it's for me really, even after five, six, seven listens, you're going to go in and you're going to find pieces of it. You think that's just fantastic. This interplay is great, or that little key change, or whatever. There's always some section of music where you think, yeah, that's actually pretty good. So I kind of wondered about how did you find that process of really putting on an analytical hat and then having to come in with sort of, okay, these are my thoughts on structurally, musically, lyrically, melodically, what's happening with a given piece of music.
Um, I think going into it, at least I don't know, I can't speak for Chaz, but I didn't have a lot of preconceived notions about it other than we were going to put in some effort on this and dig into each track, dig into the lyrics, but also in the case of Lulu, which you can't do for every album to that degree, but because Lou Reed based it on an actual play,
Yeah.
we read the play. And then because he based it on an actual play, we watched this silent movie of the play. That was really the only performance of it that we could see
Yeah.
because the play was written in the 1800s, late 1800s, and so there wasn't much left. But one thing that was really interesting, and we went back to this a little bit, the guy who wrote that play, the Lulu plays, was also the playwright for Spring Awakening, which had quite a successful run on Broadway,
Right.
starring Leah Michele and Jonathan Groff, two superstars of TV and Broadway. Leah Michele being in Glee and then going on to do lots of other things. And that was quite an interesting and successful Broadway musical. And so it's the same guy who
Yeah.
wrote the Lulu plays that Lou Reed was attracted to and wanted to write an album, his last album of music, based on that narrative. So, that maybe, I don't know if that answers the question, but willing to go to that level of researching. I know
Yeah.
you guys do that a lot in general. You try to do your homework, you research, but in this case, it was a different kind of effort,
Yeah.
actually reading a play that the music was based on,
Yeah. And so that,
and actually watching a movie that the music was based on. Although
right.
when we get to Tom Petty, right, we've got a movie soundtrack.
Right. I was
So a
going to ask you
little
then.
different. A
So
little different.
moving into seasons two, three, four, and sort of moving forward, though, I know that we'll tell people like it's more so that you tend to be listening to most of this music for the first time, and so you play through the songs, and they'll stop the song at certain points, or Chaz will stop the song, or you'll ask to stop, and then you comment in sort of almost in real time. And I do a podcast, a Queen podcast, with a friend of mine, and that's a really I'd like to comment on this because I know that my friend Randy always thinks it's hard to comment sometimes. I've only heard 30 seconds of it, or I haven't heard the whole song yet, so I don't really have the context for well, does this verse work in the context of the song? So, I want you to comment on how difficult that is to do, and because I think you do that supremely well. But it's an not unfair, but quite an unfair position almost to put someone in to say, listen to this 30 seconds of music. Now tell me what you think of it. When I know it's like the back of my hand, you know?
I guess well, first of all, that's true. I promised I hadn't previously listened to any of the four albums, and I agreed to not listen in
Yeah.
advance to any of the four albums. So I am hearing all of it for the first time when we do the podcast. So I am reacting in real time to the music in that regard. And I guess what I feel like, I mean, I do the best I can and I give my honest, reaction to the music. And
Yeah.
sometimes the music is so glaring that you're going to have a strong reaction to it no matter what, whether it's the first time you listen to it or the thousandth time,
Right.
it is what it is. But I do often feel like, hey, maybe I'm not necessarily reacting and giving a real fair opinion because I don't have enough.
Yeah.
Even one full listen is hardly enough to really give an opinion and but they ask me to, thumbs up or thumbs down on the
Yeah.
tracks and I do it, and maybe if I listen to the track 10 more times I'd change my vote, and I don't know that, but that's not what I'm there for.
Yeah.
I'm there for the instant, first impression type of reaction. But to be honest, I don't. Even though I often do vote differently than Chaz or Scott. I think it's more because they're such fans of this music,
Right.
and the only artist that I was a fan of going into this whole project is Lou Reed.
Right.
I mean, I don't dislike Van Halen, and they have some, good poppy
Yeah.
rock songs, fun party songs. Yeah, of course they do. They're a fun band, but I'm not a super fan of them in any way, and certainly not Def Leppard. I mean, I shouldn't maybe that sounded harsher than I meant it to, but I'm not, I'm less a fan of Def Leppard. I mean, to me that, is not what I am attracted to musically.
Yeah.
And certainly Van Halen more. I like Van Halen more than that. And Pink Floyd, that was a weird season to some degree. It was just like, Roger Waters is such a weird dude kind of a season. But I am a fan of Pink Floyd. I'm not a huge fan of Pink Floyd, and it's not because I don't think that they're phenomenal, and I do think they're phenomenal. I just never, there's only so much time in the world, and there's, you listen to what you listen to,
Yeah.
but everything, all the time I've spent with Pink Floyd and all the music I've heard from Pink Floyd, I very much like. Now, the
Yeah.
album that we listened to, I didn't very much like, but no one else did either. And it was, but there was, I think it wasn't our best season, but there's always interesting things to talk about, especially when you're talking about an artist that's as great as Roger Waters.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's always
And it's
aspects to it.
complicated, right? He's a very complicated man too, right? So
He's a complicated man, absolutely. And, we were comparing the original. So of course we're listening to one of the greatest rock albums ever made,
of course.
right? So that part is fun, but we're there to review the remake, and so that there wasn't a lot of we weren't able to find a lot there that
Yeah.
was too
We should say to people
positive.
listening, that was the Dark Side of the Moon Redux.
Right, Dark
That's
Side of the Moon, yeah.
the regarding series two, which I
Season two,
was
yeah, yeah.
very, very pleased to join you guys for an episode and talk about. I think it was the last one. I think it was the shakedown when you sort of broke it all out. But like you said there, you said something that I think, especially with someone like Pink Floyd, right? If you think about a track like Breathe or The Great Gig in the Sky or something, if you gave someone that song who didn't have the context of that whole album, it wouldn't mean anything to them. It would seem sort of, well, look, it's okay, but is this what most of the music's like? No, it's part of a narrative, it's part of a story, it's got all this context around it that
True.
you sort of need. So when you pull that out and you just talk about that one individual song, it can be difficult to just isolate that and say, well, yeah, this is a good song in
And
its own right.
unfair to isolate it.
Completely unfair. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that was, yeah, yeah, I don't have anything else to say about that season. It was what it was, but not a lot of good stuff came out of it
But going
for
through
us. I don't.
because you're a long time musician now, have you found, because I know that me doing this podcast and then jumping into other people's sort of music podcasts, it's definitely, if it's not sort of, I won't some in some ways improved my appreciation of music and form and structure and all those types of things. But certainly it's improved my vocabulary to be able to talk to other people about them. So I don't know if you've noticed anything. Has it changed the way that you listen to music or appreciate music? Has that any impact on that? Or
I haven't thought about that, but it's an interesting question. I'm glad you asked it. And, I would say probably. I
yeah,
don't know if I could I'd have to probably think on it and ruminate on it a little while, but I would say it probably has. But you know what it made me think of, which is really interesting. You're exactly right about a lot of people don't have the vocabulary to talk about a particular subject, like music or like whatever it is that, and to talk about, on a podcast about music, you do have to have a certain amount of vocabulary and
yeah,
experience with that. I studied studio art, not as my major in college, but, as a minor. And so
okay,
I did a fair amount of drawing and printmaking throughout college.
oh, cool,
And when you do those classes, and I don't know if you're an artist, but generally what the teachers do is students will do something and some drawing or painting or whatever that they do. And then the whole class they'll put it up on the wall. Everybody will put up there all the work, right? And then you stand around and the teacher wants to have everybody talk about their own work and each other's work, right? What did Kevin do here? What do
yeah,
you think about what Greg did? There was probably an assignment, right, that it was based on or something. And when you start in art, you don't have the words to talk about pictures, right? Like, what do you
right,
say? Oh, Kevin used a lot of red in that painting, like you don't know what to say,
yeah,
right? And then then over time, as you talk about pictures, you build up a vocabulary so that you can, really express some insights and feelings about it.
yeah.
And people have a lot of insights and feelings about music and songs, but they don't necessarily know how to express them, to the degree that you would to communicate to an audience about them, right?
For sure, yeah, and that's
Like
I
this
think,
song rocks,
yeah, which
it's
is,
great, but it's
yeah,
probably
yeah.
not enough.
But and I think that that's that thing again where when you're a nerd, and I'm a music nerd, and I'm sure you're a music nerd too, and would call yourself such. But it's that detail stuff. That's the thing you get off on, right? And being able to sort of pick into, well, listen to this. Listen, he's arpeggiating against, like he's doing it in six, but this is in four. And when you start getting into all those little nuances of things, that's when it gets really exciting. And talking to other people about that and having that vocabulary that you can then share as part of everything. It's the same with sports. The shorthand for sports. I listen to people talk about football, and they're talking about people going through the slot and pick runs. I'm like, I don't know what the heck you're talking about now, but they seem very excited by it. So,
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And every topic has, at that level,
yeah,
has that nuanced sort of vocabulary to be able to really talk about it at a nuanced level, right?
yeah.
Not at a sort of, basic level, but a nuanced level. Yeah.
So, what was music
Yeah.
like growing up for you? What was your family like? Was your musical family like? What did you grow up with listening to?
I didn't really have a musical family. Neither of my parents were musicians, and I didn't have family around me, extended family that were musicians or had a deep interest in music. My mom, so my mom, came of age in the late 50s, early 60s kind of time period. So
Yeah,
it was a very transitional period with music, and she um, was not super interested in music, but she did gravitate to some of the music. So at a young age, I some of the albums I remember, that were played at home a lot were Simon and Garfunkel's Greatest Hits,
right.
Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, She had an album. This was kind of interesting. I don't know if you've ever heard of a guy named Theodore Bickel, but he was
Don't think so.
quite a famous, quite a successful performer and Broadway performer, and he originated the role of the captain, the father in The Sound of Music
Okay.
Broadway show. Um, he was the original playing the father role in The Sound of Music on Broadway, Theodore Bickel. So he was very high level. He was also in Fiddler on the Roof on Broadway
Okay.
as Topol, the main character. But my mom had he was a singer, and my mom had this album of folk songs that we listened to, and they were folk songs from around the world, and they were all in different languages. So we didn't understand any of them,
Yeah.
but they were really, really good. And they were actually duets with Theodore Bickel and another a female singer. And they were really good. And we played them over and over again. And so that was one of the albums that got played a lot too. So, it was a little bit hippie-ish
Yeah.
sort of rock sort of direction, but very, very shallow. She didn't have very much, and she wasn't super interested in it. There was some other albums like that,
Yeah.
along those lines. So
So when
that's
did
what, as a young child, what I first heard, and
yeah,
but nobody was playing instruments, and nobody was really playing much music in the
right.
house, even recorded music.
So when did it hit you then? Because I always tell people like for me the spark when I knew that first of all I just love music and like on a serious level you just get that innate sense that this is going to be my life now, and sort of that thing of oh, and also this is exactly my music was the first time I heard Black Dog by Zeppelin. When you hear that kind of
Mm.
room, 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 that slow down, then hey, mom, when Plank, it's like, what the flipping heck is this? This is for me. Was there a moment that you remember sort of something grabbing you to that degree?
So I was thinking about that, to kind of get ready to talk to you about some of
Yeah,
topics. And there's two things that kind of came to mind. This was, I started getting into music probably in middle school, like a lot of, us did. But I think two things, at that point I wasn't sophisticated, and it's just whatever was on the radio.
of
And a
course.
lot of it was very, soft poppy type of stuff that I was hearing. I was hearing Supertramp and Air Supply,
Right.
Foreigner, the Eagles, those kind of bands. That's what I was hearing. And not that those are good bands and everything, but um, that was sort of the background. And then I remember hearing Dire Straits' Sultan of Swing,
Oh,
and I
no way.
was like, what is this?
Right.
I was like, are these old guys? Like, is this like what I just both lyrically and the sound of that band, and the way Mark Knopfler plays guitar on that song, which is so different than
Yeah.
really what you were hearing, where he picks each note out cleanly, and I don't know what about it. It just sounded otherworldly to me, and one of the things that I've always gravitated to since I've gotten, more mature in my music is more roots music. So
Yeah.
blues music, jazz music, reggae music, world music, those have always connected more with me than sort of the ones that are more derivation of those forms
Yeah.
into pop and metal and hard rock and those forms. And I felt like Dire Straits was a little bit of a bridge song to roots music, because he was more of a blues roots type of performer
Yeah.
than the Eagles or Foreigner or these other bands Supertramp, that I was hearing, which had moved much further to the sort of pop part of the spectrum,
Yeah.
and derivative of these roots musics. So I remember that song, and I was confused by it. I was like, what is that? Like who's like is this like a band like the Eagles and
Yeah.
Supertramp, or is it like some other thing? Did somebody go into a club and record a bunch of old guys, right, singing a song? Like I didn't know what it was. In my, 14 or 15-year-old brain. I was like, I
Yeah.
didn't understand what it was. It was, to me, it sounded so different. The other one that's probably even more dramatic for me was I had a friend in high school who was really into music, was more sophisticated. A couple of friends in high school that were more sophisticated and had big record collections and knew more. And he put on, I would say in the early 1980s, Bob Marley Catch a Fire.
Right.
And I
Oh,
don't know if you know that album
oh
well,
yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah.
right. So, you know, and of the Bob Marley albums, which, progressed to become more polished, a little more mainstream, a little more accessible, in all those, in the way that he wrote them, the way he recorded them, and the instrumentation and the background singers and,
Yeah.
the horn parts and, better studio and type of stuff. That was an early album, and it was definitely more a little more rough, a little more rootsy, like a lot of
Yeah.
artists that begin with their roots. And when I heard that, it was the same thing, but like, on steroids. It was like, I don't even know what this is. I didn't
Yeah.
know anything about reggae. I didn't know anything about reggae. And he puts this album on, my friend, and he's like, okay, check this out. And I was like, I just don't get it at all. Like, what is that?
Right.
Like, what's going on here? This doesn't sound like anything I know. Sounds
Yeah.
like nothing I know. You know, um, Stir It Up and 400 Years and Slave Driver and
Yeah.
like what are these
I
songs?
think
I mean,
Kinky
there's
Reggae is on that one
and
too, right? I think, isn't it?
Kinky
I think Kinky
Reggae, I
Reggae is
think,
on
is
that
on
one. Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I believe that's right. Yeah. I mean, so many great songs on that
Yeah.
album. It's a great album. I love that album. But just the way it was recorded, the way they sound, and with the three guys, and that, that I didn't know that rhythm guitar sort of up, on the
Right.
upbeat and chugga, chugga, chugga,
Get it on the
chugga.
two and
And
the
I was
four.
like,
Yeah.
it was so foreign to me that it kind of, knocked my head off a little bit. And I don't remember immediately being attracted to it. I just remember immediately being confused by it.
Right.
Dire Straits, I really liked when I first started hearing that song. I thought, wow, this is super cool. What is it? I
Yeah.
don't understand it, but I like it. Bob Marley, I was like, this is really weird. I don't know if I like it, kind of thing. And then went on to become, Bob Marley is my most favorite musical artist of all time. That's my number one guy.
Well, let me ask you then, because I mean, I argue this point all the time when we all, we get into conversations about what's the best 10 album, best 20 albums, whatever it is. And you very rarely hear anyone talk about Exodus. And I think that Exodus, top to bottom, every song could have been a single, pretty much, really. You could have probably released, I mean, maybe The Heathen would have been a bit of a stretch, but most of the songs on that record you could have released. Thematically, it's consistent. Performance wise, it's just unbelievable, off the chart, impeccable. That band is amazing and on top form. And the set of songs that he wrote for that record are, I mean, how many of those are reggae standards now? Three Little Birds, Jamming, Natural Mystic, I'd say, probably in there. So much things. These are songs that every reggae band learns. So I always think I always throw that in as a little sort of oddball. You don't forget Bob Marley. Like we're talking about rock, we're talking about pop, but don't forget about Bob because he defined an entire genre like no one's ever done, ever.
I remember somebody hearing this conversation, not live, but on TV or something, and it was somebody said, "Oh, I'm interested in learning more about reggae. Can you recommend some albums?" And the the,
Right.
the expert said, "Well, have you listened to everything Bob Marley recorded?" As
Yes,
the
it's a
answer.
fair
So.
point, right?
It is a fair point. I mean, it's a joke, but it's a fair point
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Um, we went to see. I've seen Ziggy play a few times, and we went to see him a few years back, and it was the anniversary. I forget which one it is, 50th anniversary of Exodus.
Yeah.
maybe, or whatever. And they were doing a thing, a big thing to sort of celebrate the anniversary of Exodus. And he
Yeah.
played, Ziggy always plays a few Bob songs. I don't know if you've seen Ziggy. He always plays a few Bob songs, and the crowd
Yeah.
likes it when he plays the Bob songs, and probably plays them better than anybody else on the earth at this
Of
point in
course.
time, I would say. But he plays them pretty good no matter what. And he did play a bunch of the Exodus songs on that show, and it was really
Yeah.
good. It was really
You
good.
think about those guys, it's the same with, I always think the same thing with Jacob Dylan with the Wallflowers. The temptation would be, and people want, oh, play your dad's songs or play this, and same with the Lennons and same, all those guys and Donny Harrison as well. But there's that thing of, yeah, but I'm my own. I've written my own songs and I've got like 12 albums of my own. I want to play my songs, and but that sort of fan service of, okay, well, I know that they'll, if I play I Shot the Sheriff, they're going to lose their minds. It's going to be great, and I like the song anyway. But I always think about that. Be interesting to talk to one of those guys about what's the balance of that. Would you sort of draw that line and say, I'm not. It's like Wolfgang Van Halen's a good example. He doesn't play Van Halen songs because he doesn't want to get branded with that. Well, he's just a nepotistic, he's just kind of trading off his
Just
dad's
cashing
legacy.
in on his dad's
Yeah.
fame.
So I just kind of think that would be a difficult position to be in, eh?
It absolutely is, and I think Ziggy does a really good job of both capitalizing on Bob's,
Right.
brilliant songs and also being his own guy. And he's just really had a lot of success in his own right too, which probably makes him more comfortable
Right.
playing Bob songs because it's not like, oh, you don't have anything good. We only want to listen to the Bob songs. People really like what Ziggy does too. So,
Yeah.
yeah, but I'm sure it's a tough thing. It'd be a great problem to have. I
Yeah, of
would
course.
wouldn't I would accept that problem if it was thrust upon me with, probably receive it well, but I'm sure, you know, like anything, you could find something to complain about and
Of course.
um complain that, oh God, my dad was just so rich and famous and he left this huge catalog of songs and everybody knows who I am, and oh boy, it's tough.
But there's that. I don't know if you've heard this. There's a little story about when the Heartbreakers supported Dylan on that world tour. The
Yeah.
kids are at the side of the stage, and I think it was Jacob says to Anakin Petty, "Your dad's Tom Petty," and she goes, "Yeah, but your dad's Bob Dylan." So it's just like they're completely unaware that their dads are like these heroes to all these people, right? So
Because to
cute,
them, it's just dad.
Yeah, just that idiot who comes home every now and again. So I think so. So when did
There's
okay,
a
you
cute story. You probably know this because you're the Tom Petty expert, but one that resonated with me that I read about Tom was his dad and how, when he was a young kid, like a lot of teenagers growing their hair long and playing guitar and rock
yeah,
music, his dad was like, not giving him the easiest time, I'm sure. He and his dad had, a rocky
yeah,
relationship, but then he grew up to be Tom Petty, and his dad was like, on tour with the band, being like telling everybody, I'm
that's my
Tom's
boy.
dad.
Yeah,
I'm Tom's dad,
yeah. I mean,
and like totally like just toured as Tom Petty's dad.
I think that if you, to an extent, if you're an artist who's sort of, on that sort of next wave of popular music, let's say, if you don't piss your parents off, I think probably you're not doing it right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's got to be that because rock and roll is about rebellion and it's about sort of sticking the finger up to the man or whatever it is. So if you're not kind of treading that line and probably treading it a little bit carefully, but then probably you're never actually going to be one of those artists that we remember. You need to be living on the edge a little bit, I think, don't you?
You definitely do. I heard a guy at it was a library event where they had all these speakers, like a festival, and they had all these speakers, and this guy was talking about like if if you don't dislike the music that your kids are listening to, they're probably not doing it right
Yeah. Yeah.
because you're not supposed to like the music your kids are listening
It's
to.
not made for me, right? So, yeah.
I thought that was kind of funny.
For sure, yeah. Well, I'm a huge Dire Straits fan too, and I grew up with those records. So Sultans of Swing, it's another one of those albums. It's like Queen, it's like the Beatles. They were just always there, right? I don't remember a time when I didn't know that song, so I don't have that connection with it. But when did you then? So if you don't sort of have musical instruments around the house, when do you actually start playing then? When do you start getting into that level of it?
So, the friend that introduced me to Bob Marley was a bit of a guitar player, so I started to, like when I would hang out with him, I couldn't play anything, but I would, handle the guitar a little bit,
Right.
and just try to plunk a little bit. And then when I went to college, my freshman year, I met a lifelong friend who was a bass player at the time, and
Okay.
he got a new bass and a new amp partway through freshman year, and he gave me his old bass. And that's when I
Okay.
started playing bass.
So you started on bass then?
Yeah,
Because that's not typical, I don't think. Like, because I've talked to, I know a lot of guitarists, I've talked to a lot of guitarists, a lot of bass players. Bass players usually are most of the ones I know, they start on guitar, and then they end up migrating to
absolutely.
bass. But so it's unusual that
Yeah.
your starting point was bass, which is
It is
super
it is
cool.
unusual. So I didn't and the other thing is I didn't play any instrument really as a kid.
Right.
And my story is that in like I think it was even elementary school probably when they were like, okay, it's time to pick what instrument you want to,
Yeah.
do, right? In orchestra or band. And I said, I want to do drums, right?
Yeah.
And and they give you like a little singing test and they, a little rhythm test and okay, we're gonna pick and he was like, no, no, you're not playing drums. And he wanted to give me, I forget what it was, but it was clarinet or something. And I was like, nope, not doing that, and I
Yeah.
ended up just not doing any instrument really, and until I started to get interested towards high school in a little bit. I played harmonica. I liked harmonica, and I did teach
Okay.
myself harmonica to some degree. And I was like, okay, I could play songs on it and stuff.
Yeah.
And but I never learned really had lessons and learned any instrument properly. I did take some lessons on bass in college when I first started playing bass and
Yeah.
getting interested in it, and I took to it right away. I really liked it. And then like I remember the first time I had another good friend from college, super close friend, who was already in college, a super accomplished piano player, like a jazz piano player. He was
Okay.
studying jazz and he was a music major and he was studying jazz and he went on, he went to New England Conservatory and got a master's and became, he
Wow.
was a very accomplished piano player. But I remember sitting with him when I was very, very beginning to play bass, and I couldn't play hardly anything. And he could, he knew everything, relatively,
Yeah.
and he would play, he had a piano in his house in college, and I brought the bass over and he jammed with me a little bit. And that was like the first time I ever played. And of course, with bass, I'd only been basically just kind of doing my own, trying to figure out how to play bass lines and maybe
Yeah.
play along with the record or whatever. But he would play and he would teach me a little bit and okay, do this and then I'll do this on the piano. And he was so good that you play with somebody who's like 10 times better than you and all of a sudden you think you're good, right?
They're doing all the
Which
heavy
is
lifting.
always the trick to being a good musician in a band is play with people that are better than you,
Yeah.
right? That's the secret to a good band
Of
is
course.
and so but the light went on, the light bulb definitely went on with me sitting in that house with him playing piano and me playing bass for the first time and I was like,
Yeah.
this is so cool. I
So was it
love this.
was it the interaction then? Because that's the other part of it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
playing on your own, it's a lot of fun, but as soon as you can lock in with someone else and there's any kind of spark or chemistry at all, it's just like, okay, yeah, well, this is what I'm doing for the rest of my life then. So was that
And
sort
it
of
just sounded
immediately?
so good to me.
Yeah,
I'm sure it didn't sound all that good. I mean, he sounded really good, but
yeah,
it to me, I was like, oh my God, we're great.
yeah,
This sounds so good. And so I love that how, playing with somebody. And I've always loved that, especially when I was not very good. Not that I'm that good now, but I'm better. And when you play with every time I played with a musician who was way better, more accomplished than me, like a drummer, would come in who was like relative to where my level was
right,
musically, they were way higher. And all of a sudden, the music just sounds just so much better. And it's
yeah,
just like, you can't stop smiling when you hear
yeah,
how good that drummer makes you sound
yeah.
but any instrument I've been playing with a saxophone player now for about 13, 14 years
He's
who's
good, man.
extremely good, right?
Oh
You've heard
yeah.
the recording, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so it's just like, wow, he makes us sound really good, because he's like doing crazy cool things. And he also, is the type of musician who makes the other players sound good too.
Yeah.
He's not just a showboat because he's got chops. He's like wants to make the whole thing sound good. And so, yeah, he
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
have
yeah.
played together for a long time, and we do the singing in the band that we have. And he sings. He's not a natural background singer, really. He's in some
Right.
ways more of a lead singer, but he's not really into singing lead that much either. But he's got a great ear, and you can tell that from the horn, like that he can totally hear what he's doing. And so he'll put in the harmony parts and the background parts, and it sounds great, and I love
Yeah.
it. And we just, he's my closest music guy.
Yeah.
He and I are a team. Like I've played with the drummer since he was a little kid, and we've known each other since we were kids. But musically, the saxophone player and I have really kind of bonded with like, let's make this good together. And our guitar player that we play with now is phenomenal, incredible chops type of guitar player. But
Yeah.
I don't have the same bond, musically with him, but he's phenomenal,
Yeah.
player, like just super accomplished.
So, what was your first band then? Because we're talking now about Accidental Breakdown, and we'll move on to that a little bit. But what was your first band then? Like, how old were you when you actually started? You know what? I'm ready to get up in front of people and play now. What was that like?
So I started playing with other people almost right from the beginning when
Okay.
I started um, learning bass. So probably in college, I started to try to find people to. I told you about my piano playing friend, but trying to find people. My first proper band was called Homebrewed,
Okay.
Homebrod.
I love it.
And we had a song, we had our theme song called Home Brewed, but it was brewed as it was playing off that pun between, it was about beer.
Yeah.
And it was, so we played off the pun of it was home brewed beer. And they got the idea, we got the idea for the name for the band and for the song, because at the time that we were first starting out, I was brewing beer. I was learning how to brew beer at home.
Yeah.
And so we were home brewed. And so that band lasted about 10 years probably from
Okay.
when I was in my early 20s to early 30s. When I got married and started having kids and the babies in the band wasn't compatible. So
Yeah, for sure. So was that, did you just played bass in that band or were you singing fairly
I
early
was
on
doing
too?
about half of the singing. In,
Okay.
in my current band, I do like 90% of the singing, but in that first band, I did half, and the guitar player was also a singer, and he
Okay.
sang the other half of the song. So I was more learning, you know, how to do that and stuff. And he was much more, even though he was way younger than me, he was a very natural musician. He was much more accomplished at sort of leading a band. I didn't
Okay.
have any skills for actually leading the band, but with he was still leading the songs, but I would sing lead on some of them. And he
So
would sing, and he was a great, as a young guy, relatively, he was a great harmony. He could hear harmony and he could sing harmony. And
right.
so he would, he enjoyed that and he would put harmony in if I was singing lead. And I could not sing harmony at that stage of the game. And
Yeah.
it took me a long time. I'm a slow learner musically. And so, it's taken me years and years to be able to do each thing, sing and play, learn
Yeah.
new songs more quickly, to be able to sing and play the bass on them or the
Yeah.
guitar on them, learn to sing harmony, learn how to sort of lead the band in terms of starting songs and ending songs,
Yeah.
all of the in terms of handing off solos. Okay, you're going to solo. So all of those things have took me a long time to sort of get my skills up, decades almost, really. It's that slow. And
Yeah.
I was never a full-time musician by any stretch. I was always a very part-time musician. So
Yeah.
I wasn't playing so much that, these things, I'm sure if I was playing full-time, these would have come much more quickly. but still, I felt like I was slow especially compared to this first guitar player, Ezra, who I
Yeah.
played with as when we were young. He would just it was so natural, everything. Learning a song, the I couldn't understand the time signatures and the rhythms, and he could, as a young guy, tell the drummer what the beat was that the drummer was supposed to be playing. And I just had no conception of any of that at that point. Like,
Yeah.
how do you know what beat the drummer should be playing? I could barely figure out my part on the bass, let alone what the other guys were supposed to be doing. But he knew all that instinctively. He could replicate a solo from any guitar player sort of just by ear, just
Yeah.
hear it, figure it right out,
Yeah, but those
all
those
that.
people, the fringes, though, they're the freaks, right? I mean, they're the ones, and they're great when you come
Yeah.
across them. They're great when they're good people
Yeah.
too, like especially.
Yeah.
But then that's not normal. I mean, most of us are like you and me, where it's like, well, I'm gonna have to work at this. You do need that
Mhm.
10, 20, 30,000 hours, and that guy's maybe just 5,000 hours ahead of you at that point. But that sort of
Yeah.
innate musical ear is a different thing again. But I was gonna say though, I mean, especially a lot of the type of stuff you play now, I don't know what you were playing back then, but if you're trying to sing and play a syncopated bass part. Well, now you're getting yourself in trouble because now you've got to, because I can't do that. Like I can play, if I'm playing on the beat, if I'm playing piano or playing drums on the beat, then I can sing. Anytime
Yeah.
I have to come out of that, I'm screwed. Like if I have to syncopate, then my brain won't do that. I
Yeah,
can,
I,
I can,
I'd say I'm basically the same. Like,
right.
and we learned police songs
Oh, yeah.
early on, and Sting, has that freak ability to play a bass line that's completely syncopated with what he's singing,
Yeah.
and so I consequently can't play most of those songs and sing them. I
Yeah.
can do one or the other, but I can't do both, right?
Yeah.
So I'm the same way. I have to have some downbeats that I can lock onto in the
Yeah.
in the way the lyrics are sung in order to get through it and keep the bass going. But you get it over time and you learn
For
the
sure.
tricks over time. What really has changed for me, it used to take me so long to learn a new song, right? And be able to play and sing it. It just, would take even to figure it out on the bass. It would just,
Right.
to lock it in, not figure it out, but to get it so it's locked in. And now I can do, just sort of the normal easy songs that most bands play, after the first try, I can
Yeah.
play the song. It doesn't take any time anymore. But like you said, that's the 10 or 20,000 hours,
Of course.
that it because most of the songs are pretty much the same anyway, and you just
Yeah.
learn how to play it and and
Yeah.
and how to hear it, right? Then once you put in those hours, now you just listen to a song and oh, so he's going to the four chord here.
Yeah.
Okay, you
Yeah.
just hear when he's doing the chord changes, and so I always sort of amaze myself, like because I don't have a great ear or anything, but like I'll listen to a song and I'll grab a bass or a guitar and it will take me almost no time to find, what key it's in and what the chord progression is,
Yeah.
on a simple song. Like, oh, and a lot of times I'll go right to the note without even knowing what key it's in. And I'll be like, I think it sounds like this. Yep, that's it. And then sometimes I'm like, I don't know how I knew that, because I didn't know it.
But again, I think it is that. It's like you said. I mean, when you're in especially if you're doing lots of covers in bands, and we'll get into maybe some writing stuff. But when you're doing lots of covers, you do notice that. Oh yeah, as long as I know where the A section is, where the B section comes in, is there a bridge? Are there any big pushes or weird turnarounds? There's not that many ways that pop songs, especially or blues, reggae, that kind of stuff. They're all following pretty standard patterns for the most
There's
part.
three reggae songs.
Just three. But you can play
I
them in
mean, they
more,
have
you can
different
play them in three
lyrics,
different keys
but
too, right? So
well, not counting keys, but there's three chord progressions, right?
oh,
For
it's too
reggae.
funny.
It's really two, but we'll call it three.
I got a pal who my best friend who does all my do the Queen podcast with, and he sits in with different musicians and he plays with the reggae band every now and again, the All Fuentes reggae band. And he says it's basically 1, 2, 3, see you at the end. Like it's pretty easy. Once I know which key we're in, all I've got to do is keep up. So
And people love it,
yeah, of course, yeah,
you
we can
know?
dance to it, right? I mean, that's the beauty of music.
Yeah. We'll play a gig and play a bunch of covers and mix in originals too, but we'll play a bunch of covers and songs that people know and stuff, and they'll dance and stuff. But then we'll do like I have an original song that's just like a swing blues,
Okay.
but doon 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 type of groove.
Yeah.
Everybody comes up and dances. It's not a song they know, it's a groove they know.
Of course. Yeah.
And I find that with reggae too, is we'll play original reggae grooves. We do a lot of original reggae, and it doesn't really matter. It's just they're playing a reggae groove, and I'm in.
Yeah.
And that's it. And
Well, you'd sent me your cover. We were chatting on your podcast on regarding talking about a Def Leppard, and you'd sent me a reggae version of All Along the Watchtower, and we kind of that ended up being the jumping off point for me, saying you should come on the Tom Petty project. But I was
yeah,
going to say, as I went back and started listening, so I don't know how many of these are originals and how many are covers that I just don't know. But the one that grabbed me immediately was the Lemon song. I was like, this is
really.
because it's that old Jimmy Cliff, Toots Maytal, like the early Kingston reggae, almost that two-tone kind of thing. It's got a little bit of there's lots of space in it. The guitar's got that really super cool palm muted thing going on, you know what I mean? So all that kind of
Yep.
stuff. So I wanted to ask you about
Yeah.
songwriting then.
Those are all original songs on
Okay.
that SoundCloud, except for Watchtower and Jingle Bells. I did not
Okay.
write as
Okay,
well,
that's super cool then. Yeah, it's good to
which
know,
you
man.
probably figured out.
Well, well, Lemon Song's a Led Zeppelin song, so I
So
was like,
Lemon is original. Yeah,
I think I
all
think
the other ones are original.
so I wondered if you'd covered. I thought at first it was going to be the Lemon Song by Zeppelin in the
Zeppelin,
reggae. So I
yeah.
was like, oh, that's
And
kind of going to be cool. But then it's this other thing.
and
And it's
kind of because of that, now originally I called it Lemon Song, but now we just call it Lemons.
okay,
So it
right?
doesn't have that Zeppelin kind of thing going on. I probably should change it on SoundCloud, but we just refer to it as Lemons now.
That's awesome.
But we do that. That's a bunch of those are regulars in
Yeah.
our set list.
So what's the writing for those look like? How are you the primary songwriter then for the band?
Yeah, the only nobody else writes originals in this
Okay.
band.
So how does that work for you? Because I'm always interested. Tell me your process, Greg. Tell me your process of writing a song. Where do they come from? Because I know that my best friend Randy, again, he 95% of the time writes music first. He'll come up with a groove or a lick or a harmony or a melody, sorry, or something like that. And then the lyrics are the last thing he worries about. When I write, it'll be a line or a section and a melody, and then I have to reverse engineer everything out from there, which isn't a particularly it's not an easy way of doing it. So where do you start? Like what comes first for you usually?
I would say more often than not, what you do is what I do. Is
Okay.
I something goes in my head. A lot of times I'll hear something or I'll mishear something
Yeah.
in the world, and I'll go, that would make a good line in a song, you know?
Yeah.
And I might not have even heard it right in terms of it was a song or it was, somebody saying something, but it'll go into my head as a certain line.
Yeah.
And I don't have it on the SoundCloud. No, I don't have it on SoundCloud, but I was listening to the radio and it was like an interview. Somebody was talking about something. And I think the person said, that'll take about 2 weeks, and somehow I thought I could write a song that kind of spoke to me.
Right.
And I'll have to send it to you, but that was what I reverse engineered
Yeah.
around, and I heard it'll only take 2 weeks, and then I a lot of times I do this. So that particular song that I wrote, which is fairly recent in the last year or two, I definitely had So I'm a huge Van Morrison fan, and one of the songs that I really love or connect with on Van, among many, is "Cleaning Windows."
Okay. Yeah.
You know that song?
Yeah.
and and I love Van's whole sensibility in that, and I really am attracted to it. And so when I heard that line on the radio, it only takes 2 weeks. I connected it to because I've always loved that song. I can write a song about a tradesman. So cleaning windows is about these guys who clean windows for a living. And they wash houses, windows on the houses. And I thought I can come up with a tradesman, and he's the job. So it only takes 2 weeks, and then the job will be done. I'll be back
Right.
next year is the lyric. And it's about a guy who's doing fall cleanup. So the
Okay.
leaves come down. The first verse starts with setting the scene, and the ground is thick with orange and yellow,
Yeah.
is one of the lines in the song. And he pulls his hat down a little tighter. It's a little cold. The sun's low,
Yeah.
I'll be back tomorrow, and he's got a pickup truck and a tarp, and I'll be back tomorrow, and then I'll be back next year, because it'll be time to do the job again. So I had a very Van Morrison, and I kind of stole. So I don't know if you remember in the Van Morrison song. Oh, I should also say, when I was in college, I cleaned windows for about 3 years as a
So it
summer
spoke to you.
job. So it spoke to me from that standpoint too. And I liked, Zen in the art of cleaning windows. It was kind of a spiritual experience in the way everything for Van is a spiritual experience, right? Because
Yeah.
he's such a spiritual guy. But, he also like connects it to he like everything to he talks about uh, uh, Jack Kerouac, right? He's like, he says something about On the Road and Dharma Bums, the
Yeah.
Kerouac novels, and he's listening to the blue, he mentions Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee. I'm listening to Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee. I'm reading Jack Kerouac. And on the weekend, I'm blowing saxophone in a down home band, right?
Yeah.
He's the musical window cleaner.
Love
And so
it.
I took that line too. I think I might have ripped that off entirely on playing saxophone on the weekends or so. I forget what I said, but some reference to Van in that
Yeah, yeah,
song
yeah.
about playing saxophone.
It's funny though, that, isn't it?
So,
One little thing can give you that window into just this
yeah,
whole story. Then and I think that's, songwriters are storytellers, or most decent songwriters are storytellers, and just having that one little starting point, that's super cool. And I know Petty used
that's
to do it all the
much more
time, right?
narrative than a lot of my songs. And you heard the Lemon song, which isn't narrative at all, but this
Yeah,
one happens to be one of my more narrative songs that really does tell a story and sort of a character development that's
yeah,
not me, you know.
yeah.
And because I don't do that for a living, but I can put myself
Of course.
like it's so romantic the way Van Morrison talks about the job of cleaning windows.
Yeah, for sure. So the first
And
song you write then, and again, this is another question I love asking songwriters. I mean, the first song we all write tends to suck because, of course, it's the first time you tried doing anything right. They're never that good. But the first song you actually got to a stage where you thought, I think I want to play this for people and see if they'll play it with me and see what people think. Was there any sort of trepidation on your part going into that, or were you sort of fairly confident by that point where you thought, my band are pretty good guys. I don't think they'll tell me that I'd sting. But do you remember that process of getting a song to the stage where you thought, I think I'm ready now to show this to someone?
I started trying. I actually, that's interesting because I really started trying to write songs before I was ready to play music with
Okay.
anybody, and before I really had very many skills at all playing instruments. So, and the other thing that's very unusual, even more unusual than starting out on bass, is writing songs on
Yeah.
bass.
Yes.
And one of the things that happened for me, because when I was writing songs on bass, is all the songs came out reggae
Right.
because I only knew how to play bass. I didn't have any chords, so I would just play these grooves, and everything seemed to come out reggae. So
Yeah.
all my early songs were that. But one thing that's interesting is really almost the first song I ever wrote was a song called Surfin' Rasta,
Okay.
which is I didn't send, there is a recording of it, but it's not on my SoundCloud. And I wrote it when I was in college still and just learning, to play
Yeah.
bass and stuff like that, maybe a year in to playing bass. And it's a song that I brought it to the band and the savant guitar player, and he helped me a little bit, tune it up a little
Yeah.
bit, while I was working on it, because I didn't know anything about what I was doing. But I had the bass part, and I knew I didn't understand enough about music to know what the chord progressions were that I was writing, but
Yeah.
I knew what I wanted it to sound like, and I played that as the bass, and I played it for him, and he was like, okay, yeah, that's these chords.
Yeah.
And just very, it's actually a little more unorthodox than some of the stuff that I wrote as I got more accomplished, because I think that is, sometimes knowing too much and having too much theory kind of
Yeah.
inhibits your creativity, right?
A
And
100%.
so that's one of my more I think a little more unique and non-traditional sort of structures. But that song has stuck around, and I play that in my band currently almost every gig or most gigs, and it's 40 years later.
Oh man, that's awesome. That's so cool. So
And
it
my
sounds
band,
like,
both bands they love playing that song.
but it sounds like then you are a songwriter who also actually happens to play bass rather than being a bass player
I
who,
really am, and
yeah,
looking at some of your, some of the stuff that you wanted to talk about today, people say, what do you play in the band and stuff? And well, I mostly play the bass in the band,
yeah,
and I sing, but really, I've never focused a lot of musicians and a lot of people who play instruments focus a lot of time and energy on their instrument, on rehearsing their instrument, practicing their instrument, getting better, learning it more deeply, all those things, their skills, their chops, their whatever. And that hasn't been my main interest has been the writing and the singing is
right.
what I'm more interested in. I'm not a great singer, but I like to sing and I can carry a tune. And I've gotten better at it. Like anything, the more you do,
Yeah,
I've gotten better as a singer. And that's what I consider myself more that than I play bass because someone has to in the band, you
right.
know, and I enjoy it. And I do. And I'm being facetious. I do like playing bass and I enjoy playing bass. And I think it's a really, it's an important instrument. Maybe that's why I like playing reggae because the bass is more in front and I, like,
Of course.
and but I think it's a good instrument for a band leader to play too because you kind of can control both the chords and the rhythm of the band with that
Yeah,
instrument and kind of direct the drummer and the guitar player around a little bit with the bass.
yeah.
Um,
Well, yeah, I mean,
so
the
it's
bass and the drums, I mean, this whole thing about these flashy gits up front with their microphones and twirling about and everything, if your rhythm section isn't locked in, you've not got a band, man. There's no band there,
Yeah,
right?
and nobody's gonna dance.
No, no.
And that's how you know if you're doing a good job, right? If
For
people
sure.
are dancing.
Okay, well, when did you get into Petty? Let's start talking. Let's drift slowly into Petty. What do you remember? Did you hit him like Full Moon Fever? Because a lot of people found him then. Was it earlier? Like, what was your experience with discovering his
No,
music?
I'm a older guy, so I actually the first stadium concert, and I don't go to that many stadium concerts. That's sort of never been my thing. But when you're a teenager, stadium concerts are like a big deal, right?
Yeah.
And you have to go see rock bands. And Tom Petty was the first stadium concert I ever went to.
No way.
At
Wow.
17.
So what tour was that? What year was that?
Uh, Early 80s, I guess.
So do you know what? Well, so you're 17. Like, oh, well, so what year were you born? Like, let's. Because if you tell me what
I
year
was
it was, then I could let you know probably what tour it is. So,
it w I don't remember the year, but I was born in 65, so that would be
so
what,
been 80 to 82
81,
then.
82?
Oh, so you must have been riding around Long After Dark then, or Hard Promises, right in there, right in Hard. Oh
Right in
man,
there.
yeah, you caught them
Yeah.
early then, right? When they were still the
Really
band.
early. But the problem was I was so young. I don't
Yeah.
think I was even 17. It might have been 80.
Okay.
It could have even been 79 possibly.
Wow. Okay.
Or 80 or 81. I would say those are probably the likely years. But I think I was like maybe 16. I could have even been 15. I can't even
Okay.
remember how old I was. Between 15 and 17, I think. But it was like, between the drinking and being out, and we went by ourselves. I had actually my drummer in my band who I mentioned that I grew up with, his older brother was my friend and he was a year older than me. So
Okay.
he was driving, but I think he was just barely driving. So he was probably 16 or 17 and I was like 15
Yeah.
probably. And we drove down to New Jersey to Giant Stadium, which
Oh,
is like
wow.
an hour probably from where we are, hour and change.
Yeah.
And big Giant Stadium in New Jersey where the Giants played. And I didn't know much about Tom Petty. I probably knew some of the hits that had come out in
Yeah.
those recent years. Probably knew Refugee or something. but not much. And this was before my initiation into Bob Marley, even,
Right.
so this was very early. And so I wasted that show. I didn't deserve to go to that show, and I didn't give Tom the, attention he deserved. I
Yeah.
probably was paying more attention to my friends than Tom, and who was drinking what, and who was passing out,
Yeah.
and all of that. So, who was throwing up in the bleachers, and I mean, it was that sort of a situation. So it wasn't about the music, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And that was the only time I saw Tom Petty live.
Man.
So I'm sad about that. And I obviously had no idea that he would die so young. And it
Of
was
course.
always like, oh, should we go and see him on this tour? Should we
Yeah,
go
we
to
got
the,
time.
and it just got so stupid expensive.
Yeah.
And I was like, ugh. It just, and it was a horrible mistake, but that's how it ended up. And I just totally didn't get to see him when I would have, you know,
Yeah.
loved and appreciated him fully. So,
For sure. For sure.
I forgot what the question was.
Oh no, no, that's
When did I
exactly.
come into Petty? Well, that's when I
Yeah.
when I, I knew about him because he was so big, and he was so, um, which, you know, everybody, he was just so big. I mean, everybody knew Tom Petty. Like,
Yeah.
I can't remember a time when I was aware of music that I wasn't aware of Tom Petty. So there was no discovery of Tom Petty. He was just
Just part
there.
of it. Yeah.
He was just part for me in the time that I came up, because those albums were just so big, with Refugee and The Waiting were so huge.
Yeah.
They were just ever present. And then I got into I was part of the MTV generation, and then he had his songs on MTV that were sort of ever present too.
Of course.
Don't Come Around Here No More, one of the videos that was just on repeat, just constant.
Yeah.
And one of the songs from Long After Dark, I think, was on repeat on
You got
MTV.
lucky. Would have been the
I
video. Yeah.
don't know
You.
if it was You Got Lucky. I think it was maybe one other one that they had made a real cool video for.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
it
sort
was
of.
like a time. It was like sort of a futuristic Mad Maxy
Yes.
video.
You got lucky. Yeah. That's the one. Yeah.
That is You Got Lucky.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So there were there were videos of Tom that were just so ever present. And, I
Yeah.
didn't even at that time, I didn't, in those early years, I didn't understand that much about music. I didn't have a lot of context
Yeah.
to understand his music in. Just they were, hits, and I liked them, but I didn't know what I was listening to really at
Didn't
that
dive
point.
in.
So,
Yeah.
but, well before Full Moon Fever, I was
Okay.
very, very aware of Tom Petty.
So then, because we were chatting on the podcast, and you were saying that you were a big fan now. So at what point then? Because for me, it was when I didn't get into Petty really until I got here. The Wilburys I was into more than Petty because I was a big Beatles fan and I'm a big ELO fan, and so that was like an easy one for me. So there
Mhm.
was like, who's this Tom Petty kid who's hanging around with all these legends? You know what I mean? So then when I came over here about 10, 12 years ago, I started going back and listening to the catalog. And when you do
Yeah,
that and you listen to the Heartbreakers and his solo catalog all the way through, it's just like, this is just consistently phenomenal. Like not just
yeah.
above average, it's all excellent. And it kept being excellent and just almost
You could make a case that he's the best there ever was.
you'll not get any argument from me on this, you know what I mean?
You know, with how good a songwriter, musician,
Yeah,
performer, and just the expansiveness of the catalog.
right.
He's just in such an elite class.
I always think too that and I'll get you to maybe comment on this and see what you think about this. He's a very American artist, but not in that sort of flag waving, rah rah, red, white, and blue kind of way. But he's got that sort of he embodies America in a really natural, uncomplicated way. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
I think so. I mean, yeah, he's a very, I think that's right. He sounds American. I think coming from Florida and that Southern tradition that he
yeah,
has. is a very American thing, as opposed to other parts of the country where it's not as clear. I mean, that
Right.
having that Southern accent, and having that Southern sensibility, but then also as a young guy going across the country to LA to make his way in the music business and having that whole LA scene uh, as a counterpoint, to this
Yeah.
growing up in the South, I think formed him into a very American, thoroughly American artist.
Yeah, one of the best. I
Yeah,
mean, obviously, the comparison tends to be with him and Springsteen, but I always think that Springsteen's, you don't think of him as much as American as New Jersey, right? Because he sort of
yeah,
locks himself into that. It's not a bad thing. It's not a criticism, but he's very specific to that kind of region of the country where Petty's got, you know, the boss has got Jersey and Petty's got everywhere else almost. You know what I mean? Maybe not Seattle. Maybe that's kind of that's a little bit different again. But most of the rest of the
yeah,
country, Petty sort of seems to vibe with pick your state. Like he's got something for everyone in there. And I think that's part of what you were
yeah. I
saying
don't.
about with.
I
Sorry, go
I
ahead.
like and respect Bruce Springsteen a lot, as a musician and a human. And he's incredible, but I don't, I just always have felt like they're so different
Yeah,
to me that I don't put him almost in the same category. And for me, Springsteen is more in the Dylan category than in the Petty
right.
category.
So where do you
He's
land
more
with
of a
Dylan then?
poet.
Where do you land
He's
with
more of
Dylan?
a poet.
Yeah. Are you a
Sorry,
Dylan
what?
fan then? Are you a Dylan fan?
Oh yeah, yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
Okay.
Yeah, I love Dylan.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love, and you talk about the Wilburys, and I love that Petty and Dylan were together
Yeah.
in that band as brothers
Yeah.
in rock, in some ways, And Dylan's such an interesting figure because he doesn't come out of the rock tradition like these other guys do. He comes out of the folk tradition,
Yeah.
right? And Petty is just Petty to me is the quintessential American rocker.
Yeah.
He is just like if you had a picture of a rocker in the dictionary of American rocker, it would have to be Tom Petty.
Right.
That is the quintessential American rocker,
Yeah.
right? Springsteen is, an incredible and unique and, type of a guy, but he's definitely, has more. I think his roots and his sensibilities come from different areas. And I know that Springsteen had said that he was a huge Roy Orbison fan, which is so interesting that Roy
Yeah.
was in the Wilburys. And I forget, I think I first heard. I mean, I definitely heard Orbison through that connection when those guys it wasn't really Petty or the Wilburys. It was more Springsteen that
Okay.
brought Orbison, I think, into sort of a view again, a renaissance, an Orbison renaissance as an old guy. He was like, I don't know, 70 or something. And, he had been as a young guy, a pop star, a rock, a star, and
Yeah.
very successful. And then, he kind of faded and his style kind of went out of vogue and stuff like that. And then guys like it was Springsteen and it was Jackson Brown and it
Right.
was a few of these guys and they came and kind of brought him back a little bit with their fame,
Yeah.
out front. And then of course he went into the Wilburys too. And but I remember Springsteen saying that, on Born to Run that he wanted to sing like Roy Orbison, right?
Which is that's a tall
And
order too, because no one sings
yeah,
like Roy.
and I, you don't hear that at all, and it
Yeah.
doesn't sound like he's trying to sing like Roy Orbison, but in his head, Roy Orbison had such a unique voice and
Yeah.
singing ability and range and all these things that I guess Springsteen was attracted to, and I love Roy Orbison too, and I
Yeah.
think he's really unique and amazing and interesting as a songwriter and a singer. But I think that. Like, I don't get the impression that Tom Petty would ever have thought as a young guy writing his, early albums and stuff that he wanted to sing like Roy Orbison. But there's a funny story. I don't know if you know this story, which is that Roger McGuinn was listening to the radio and I think American Girl came on and he was
Yeah.
like, said to the person next to him, he's like, Gosh, I don't remember recording this one.
It's one of those
You know,
early
when the
songs for
Birds
sure.
were
Yeah, it's
still in their
so funny. Yeah,
heyday.
yeah. But
But,
it,
I mean, obviously that, clearly was a big influence on
yeah.
Petty. I haven't really heard him talk too much about or read too much about that Roger McGuinn influence, but you certainly can hear it
Oh, it
in
was
the
huge. Yeah, I
Rickenbacker
mean,
guitars and the
absolutely. I mean, and
yeah.
some of the covers they used to do, "So You Want to Be a Rock and Roll Star," and they did all kinds of,
Yeah.
um,
So
covers and
huge
just cover on full
influence,
movie.
yeah.
It was a huge influence, but I think that that's what I always find super interesting about Petty, and a lot of people too. Like, if you talk to anyone about their influences, oftentimes you think, really? I don't hear any of that. Like the number of people who say the Beatles, right? Ozzy Osbourne was like he was Beatles mad. Well, Black Sabbath doesn't sound. I mean, it's a billion miles away from the Beatles, right? But Petty had
Yeah.
that kind of that thing where the greats have like McCartney had this as well, and Dylan to an extent as well. But they would bring in all those things they were listening to, but they would never copy them. They would never parody them. They would always just kind of subsume them, and then whatever came
Yeah.
out was them, but it was informed by rather than sort of directly,
Yeah.
pushed by.
And
I
and
always
that's the
think.
way I always took it with Orbison and
Yeah,
Springsteen because he was not trying to sound like Orbison, but
yeah.
there was something about Orbison that he wanted to ingest and make part of his DNA.
Well, I'd written down this guy. I always frame it this way, and it's kind of a bad way of putting it, but like in terms of sort of how your relationship with Petty's music has changed, because I've talked to lots of people about this subject, but Wildflowers as an album is one of those really great use cases of, I think if you're 25 years old, I think you can enjoy Wildflowers as an album. I don't think you get it. I think once you get to 45, 47, 50, and you've lived a little bit, and you're a guy who's been through some challenges and you've had sort of all these relationships, I think you get Wildflowers in your mid 40s and in your 50s. And Petty, for
Yeah.
me, is also one of those guys who his career grew with us, but it never got stale. It was never sort of, he never phoned an album in. Even you look past Wildflowers, if you look at Echo, Songs and Music from She's the One you were talking about, the soundtrack album earlier, into Echo, into The Last DJ, into Highway Companion, his last solo record, then into Mojo, Hypnotic Eye. You've got albums here that are he's still finding something important and interesting to say, even though he could have gone into greatest hits mode 20 years before that. So in
Yeah.
terms of that sort of that kind of side of it, where as a more mature guy and as a musician then who's been doing it for 20 years, and you go back and you listen to Petty, do you appreciate that more once you get older, do you think? Like what does that look like for you?
So so like I said, I came into Petty at the beginning,
Yeah,
really, probably hearing American Girl on the radio when it was coming out
yeah,
and hearing Damn the Torpedo songs, the hits, and those songs on the radio, hearing the Hard Promises songs. So
yeah,
that was kind of my coming into Petty, and I was young when when he was releasing those
yeah,
songs. And uh, I really, I would say, started, I paid a lot of attention to Petty in college in that time
okay,
frame, probably not so much in high school, but, 18 and older kind of age. And when you're in that 18, 19, 20, college years and stuff, and Petty, those albums spoke to me emotionally as an 18, 19, 20-year old. And I felt,
right,
and Tom was older than me, but he wasn't that much older than me.
yeah,
He was whatever, 15 years older than me or something, So he was 30 when I was 18 or something,
yeah,
And, and he was writing songs at that point about sort of being a young man, right?
yeah,
And not sort of what it was like and songs like Here Comes My Girl and Even the Losers and Don't Do Me Like That and
hmm
those type of songs. I was living that when Tom, those emotions when Tom was writing those songs.
yeah,
And so I connected very viscerally with those songs at that time in my life, right?
yeah,
you know, and then we got older together. So it's,
right,
it's interesting because, when you grow with an artist, and you start out and he's a young artist, and a young person, and his relationships are in that, time of his life and that stage of life, and then, I just really, so I kind of locked in with him, and then, as the stuff came along after that, I paid a lot of attention. Um, to all the albums that came out in that sequence,
Okay.
because that was my music now, right?
Yeah.
After um, Hard Promises and um, Long After Dark, and then uh, the other studio, the Heartbreakers albums that came, and I still like those, and I really loved Southern accents,
Yeah.
even though it was really different,
It's a
in
bit of
a
a
lot of
mess,
ways,
but
but I loved it. Let Me Up, I've Had Enough, right? I just liked a lot of the songs on that album too.
yeah.
And like those, and then, when he started releasing the solo stuff, yeah, Full Moon Fever, I was in, and so, but I would say that those Damn the Torpedoes and Hard Promises songs were the ones that I had the most emotional connection to. And then I appreciated Tom just for being, continuing to be a cool guy and to rock out and to have cool songs and to
Yeah.
be smart and have cool lyrics and say things that were good. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. But
Yeah.
I didn't, that was the most emotional connection. So I would say that's how it evolved for me, is from a very, very visceral, emotional, as a young guy, as a teenager, late teenager, college age,
Yeah.
to somebody who's an adult, and then
Okay.
just appreciating Tom. And he was writing different songs when he was an adult, and a grown guy, and maybe had kids or a marriage behind him,
Yeah.
and had been working in the music business and had struggles and contract and record company issues and divorces, and the songs are different, right?
Yeah.
And he started to write about more adult things, but I appreciated that, and I just always liked what he did.
Well, and it's funny because, like I said, those early albums, if you talk about, the first maybe 10 albums or 9 albums, it's kind of like a funnel. It's Petty learning how to songwrite and still being, I mean, brilliant songwriter even as he's learning. But those early albums, they're collections of songs more than they are sort of, what I would call like an album. To me is always like there's a sonic through line and there's some tonal consistency, and that's to me the great albums sort of need that a little bit. You get into Wildflowers, he just gets so locked into, I know what I want to do. I know how this needs to sound, and I know what people it's going to take, whatever it might be, to get this to be exactly what I want it to be. And once he got into that lane, he never strayed out of it again. Like he never made a record for the label, really. I mean, of course, obviously, there's the business side, and you got to write the single, you got to try and find something that they can release and all this kind of stuff. But Petty was always writing from that point on, in my mind, for himself. And I think that that's that trusted from a pure artist that my audience will come with me. If I write from here and it's genuine, it's authentic, and everyone believes me, they'll come with me. Don't worry about that. The label, don't worry about that. They'll come. The records will sell because it's me and I'm writing about what's important to me, and that happens to be important to everyone because there's these universal topics that I'm singing and writing about. So to me, I've always said that as impressive as his early career was, it's his late stage career that sets him apart from a lot of his contemporaries. Because I don't know, and I'm a Springsteen fan generally. I don't think Springsteen ever had a Hypnotic Eye, which is the last Heartbreakers record that Tom released in 2014 or whatever it was. He didn't have that album that was just like, what? How the hell are they still making records this good this late in their career when they should be winding down? So that's to
Yeah.
me what sort of that was that step and that realization for me that this guy it belongs at that top table because he sustained it for so long and he wasn't done.
Yeah.
Like you could tell there were still songs in there and still new
Yeah.
ideas to try, new things to try. There's a reggae song on Mojo. Like the hell's Petty doing reggae now? What the heck is this now? Don't pull me over. It's a brilliant song.
Yeah, I think that's right. You know, I, I'm sure as a young writer. He had a lot of things on his mind when he was writing songs, and being successful, I'm sure, was one of them, right?
Yeah,
But he always struck me as a guy that wrote from the heart and wrote what he wanted to say,
yeah,
at the time. But you're right, as you get more mature as a songwriter, you form songs differently, you form
yeah,
albums differently. He had a lot of hours in the studio, a lot of hours writing, a lot of
yeah,
hours, recording and all that. So yeah, it changed, you get more skills
for sure.
for sure. He had, I mean, obviously had great producers that he was working with too. So
And a great
that, when
band.
you're working with,
Great band
and a
too. I
great
mean, people
band. Yeah.
forget about how good that band is, you know.
So good.
And the bass players we've had, you had two, well, Ron Blair and Howie Epstein, and then a couple of little odd sort of pop-up appearances, but guys who he always managed to pick the right guys too. That was another thing. Like if you needed a new drummer, when he found Steve Ferroni after Stan Lynch leaves, well, now you get in exactly the right guy for that period
Did
because
Stan Lynch leave or was asked to leave?
Yeah, but it was not good. It was
Yeah.
acrimonious and
Yeah.
long lasting, but I think they put it to bed finally at the end. But
But do you want to know who my favorite player in the band is besides Tom?
well, we got that's going to be one of our 10 questions, so
Oh,
we'll
that's
hold
oh, that's right. That's
hold
one of
that
your
thought. Yeah,
questions.
we'll
Sorry.
hold
Yeah.
that thought. But I was just going to sort of
I'm jumping
wrap
the
that.
gun.
I was going to wrap that little bit up though, Wolfie, by saying that I think that you sort of hit on something there, or we hit on something there that, which is you were talking earlier about. You said like I'm not a great vocalist, I'm not a great singer, but there's a believability about your voice and the songs that you write that's engaging, right? I mean, and if you don't have to be Sebastian Bach or Ian Gillan, and you don't need that
Lou Graham.
incredible range of, you just need to be able to sell your songs to people and make sure they know that they're authentic. And I think you do a fantastic job of that. I'm going to put links to your SoundCloud playlist into the episode notes for people to check out because you go and listen.
Okay.
Wolf's a good singer, good songwriter, man. I'm enjoying digging in.
It's funny because it's such I haven't done much recording. We did record some songs as the homebrewed band way back in the day
Right.
in a studio, and I've been working on some studio stuff more recently for another project. But it's just the SoundCloud is from such a huge range of years
Right.
and events. You can tell there's live
Yeah.
songs and some studio and some rehearsal and some home recordings and
Yeah.
just a little bit of everything. But some of those songs on there are 3 years old, and some of those songs are 33 years old.
Right. Yeah, but they're all you
But
at
they've
the end of the
stuck
day, right? So,
around. Yeah. But yeah, I've always been lucky that way. Both bands, I've had people that would play my original songs with me.
yeah, it's a big thing, right? It's a big leap of
Yeah.
trust to say, okay, well, we'll do them.
And
We'll see how they
it's
go.
it's so gratifying when you're doing a gig, right? And you're playing a song and it's your song, and people are responding to it. Like
Yeah,
I've played songs for people who have never heard the band before, and they are singing along with originals
that's
in the
awesome, man.
chorus, you
That's awesome.
know?
I mean, like you think about
And
that, hey, like we write songs, and as we're sort of amateur musicians or part-time musicians, whatever, and if one person says, "Oh, I really like that song," that's a great feeling. Imagine being in
yeah,
front of 100,000 people all singing the words to a song that you wrote in the back of a taxi or
I
something. That
know,
must just
right?
be no wonder these guys go
It's
off the
mind
rails.
blowing. But some of like any sort of local band, like you have your friends and people who come and see the band, right? And
Yeah,
so some of these people have heard these songs a lot of times, these original songs.
yeah,
And it's not that many originals that we play with the band, maybe 20 or so originals
right,
across, not in one gig, but
right,
across gigs. And so they've heard all of them, and they might have heard them 5 times, 10 times, maybe more, some of these people.
yeah,
And we did a gig. It wasn't a gig, it was a showcase. It was a free, unpaid thing as a showcase before an open mic night. So we did an hour of music, and we just did all original for an
okay,
hour. And after I finished, I was sitting with some of my friends, and I had said I said, these are all originals. We're doing all originals tonight. And which I don't do that in paying gigs,
yeah,
because I don't feel that's right. And But if they're not paying me, I can do originals, right?
Yeah.
And I sat down and my friend, she's like, those weren't all originals. I'm sure I've heard those on the radio. And I was like, no, those are all originals. But
Well,
she had just heard them enough times,
yeah,
that they were in her head, right?
yeah. That's a good
That I
thing.
know these songs.
That's a good thing, man. Yeah. Okay, well, we should wrap up, Wolfie. Where can people find you?
Okay.
Tell people about the podcast, where they can find those, and gigs coming up if they're in the Northeast over there, in New York and Connecticut. Tell people what's going on.
Yeah. Well, the regarding series is I think everywhere you find podcasts, but we're on Apple and we're on Spotify.
Yeah.
And the band is called Accidental Breakdown, and in Connecticut, and we play here in Fairfield County, Connecticut. And the best place to find us is on Facebook at Accidental Breakdown.